Okay, good evening. I'm calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for May 5th, 2020. As a reminder, we will be doing all votes as roll call votes. Can the recorder please call the roll?
Member Stapleton?
Here.
Chair Tigan?
Here.
Secretary Anderson?
I'm here in 2021, not 2020.
Member Sherrick? Member Phillips?
Here.
Member Davis?
Here.
Vice Chairperson Leung?
Here.
Thank you. Member McCoy?
Here.
Member Gonzalez?
Here.
Member Brown?
Present.
Member Hoy?
Here.
Member William Anderson?
Here.
Member Nordike?
Here.
Member Sund?
Here.
Member Lewis?
Here.
Member Milton? Absent. Member Bennett?
Here.
And Member DeCarmo is absent.
Okay, thank you. Please stand by for technical difficulty on your chair's behalf. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, folks, I realize I have the wrong script printed out and I want to say the right things at the right times. And Secretary Anderson, your comment struck me because I'm looking at the script from last year. So I'm not sure how that ended up on my printer. And it's funny that you would notice that I have the wrong script in my hand. So it's kind of 2 for 2. Just stand by while I open up the correct script for the evening. Thank you.
I didn't notice the script. I just noticed the date.
Well, we weren't going to get through this without one lump, I suppose. And that I was able to wing it this far in advance is like a good sign for all of us. Okay. All right, well, we have some additions to the agenda now that we're back on track. And could I have a motion to approve the additions to the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Leung, for your motion and Member Chirac for your second. Is there any discussion about our additions to the agenda? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Boy, now I'm just a little bit anxious, and I'm going to double check that we're on the right day. It's still the 5th of May, right? Okay, we're going to begin tonight with public comment. This is an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting for comments on the agenda for items other than the public hearings and deliberations. It turns out tonight we have no one signed up for public comment, but I would point you to the public testimony that was provided to you in writing by city staff. So thank you for that. The next order of business on the agenda is the approval of the April 28th, 2021 Budget Committee minutes. Thank you. May I have a motion from the floor to approve the minutes of the April 28th, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Secretary Anderson, and a second by Member Lewis. Any discussion on the minutes? Member Stapleton.
Yeah, I think I saw an error, and I think it actually happened in the meeting. So the notes are not an error, but the comment in the meeting was an error. And I think that was about how we found the red light camera budget was credited to Sund, and I wanted to make sure that Chair Tigan got kudos for finding that, because that was really, really important. So thank you.
Oh. Well, thank you for that correction. Are there any other discussion points or comments on the minutes as provided to the committee? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition can be signified by saying no. Okay, not going to count those as no votes. We will consider the minutes approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, there is one item before us tonight. Josh, can you walk us through the errata sheet?
Thank you, Chair Tigan. Errata sheet 6 updates and corrects the community renewal fund budget. The city is being allocated an additional approximately $2.5 million in home funds as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, separate from the city's direct allocation. Also, this action budgets the carryover of the CDBG CARES funding of $860,360 that was allocated to the city. Adding at this point in the process allows the city to avoid a supplemental budget during fiscal year 2022 to appropriate the funding. And the last change this action does is to fully appropriate the funding to ensure its availability for an additional change of $173,260. The total addition to the community renewal fund budget is $3,382,990. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, very good, Mr. Eggleston. Can I have a motion from the floor to approve the errata as outlined by the staff?
I make a motion to approve the errata as outlined.
Thank you, Vice Chair Leong. Do I have a second?
Second.
Go with Member Anderson. Thank you. Any discussion? There's quite a bit in that explanation. If there's time to ask questions of staff as well. Member Anderson, thank you.
So just to clarify, does this mean the city has $3.3 million more dollars than we thought, or that we've spent $3.3 million more than we thought?
We're being allocated additional dollars in about the $2.5 million range for the home program. And then the balance is actually already in the fund. We're just making sure we have it appropriated for next year.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no additional questions or discussion, all those in favor of accepting the errata, please say aye.
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 Any opposition signified by saying no. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we are now at item 5 of our agenda tonight. We have 3 information items before us. Josh, can you walk us through our reports?
I can, and the information items have grown since the script was written, just slightly. The first item is the summary of budget committee actions through April 28, 2021. The second item is responses to committee questions from last week and prior weeks for the budget committee. The 5C, the third item, is Monday hours at the main Salem Public Library. It's a staff report in response to a question a couple weeks ago. The next item is ARPA. It's an ARPA and future funding framework for your consideration. And then the next 2 items is an information item on a motion that Secretary Anderson made and wanted to get out to all of you. And then the last item is a proposal from the United Way on a mobile crisis response unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Does the committee have any questions of the staff about these reports? Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the question I asked regarding translation services both in ASL and Spanish. I just wanted to confirm that the number provided will pay for simulcast in Spanish and also ASL translation at all city council meetings. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. So we compared it to certain meetings we've had at the Human Rights Commission using about a 2-hour meeting, and then we upped it to 2.5 hours for council meetings. So we feel that the numbers are good, and we reached out to a vendor that provides simulcast in Spanish for the city of Kaiser at the moment. So that $90 an hour figure is what they're currently charging.
Thank you. And so that there wouldn't be any fees or anything we would need to provide to, I can't think of their new name, CCTV?
CC Media. All of their services provided with the funds we pay them through the cable franchise fees that we get. So there could be impacts to them, but there likely wouldn't be an additional charge to the city.
Thank you.
Member McCoy.
Make sure. Okay. So I'm looking at the ARPA future funding responses, and it says under funding framework, I don't know what page it is, page 5, it gets into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in it, it says, with the initial equity lens work complete, the organization's DEI plan underway, a 2-year limited duration position, $300,000 for 2 years within the city manager's office would be funded. And among the things they would do was work on recruitment strategies. Is that the answer to the questions that was asked? And we got Member Anderson with a proposed motion to fund such a position. Is this mean this is funded and it's moving forward because the ARPA stuff passed or not? I'm not quite sure what that means in context of the report.
Good question. Thank you. City Manager Powers, would you like to address that?
Certainly, thank you. The American Rescue Plan Act framework information was provided not so much for any specific actions, recommendations that will be made at a future time to City Council. It was to share with the Budget Committee that there is going to be a process and that there will be council engagement with those decisions regarding the allocation of those federal dollars. As the report states, one of the areas certainly reinforced by the Budget Committee discussions previously, one of the areas of emphasis that's emerging from the organization, because that's the only level that this has really been before tonight, has really been shared. One of those areas of emphasis emerging from the organization's work is diversity, equity, inclusion. And what is in this report is the best thinking at this time from the staff.
Member McCoy, would you like to follow up?
I'd like to follow up. So this is a proposal of a way to use the ARPA money, because the way it's stated, it sounds like there's $300,000 for the budget for this year for this thing, but it's not. So it's in the future somewhere. Would that be 6 months from now, or next year's budget, or in January, or what?
The allocation of funds, the recommendations to City Council, again, we've been waiting for from the rules for the Department of Treasury, bringing together, as you can, I think, tell from that document, there's a lot there, doing some further, not necessarily on the DEI piece, but on other pieces, additional vetting of our ability to deliver on projects that have been tentatively shown on this list. January, I think, is very realistic, if not earlier, because of the importance of the work in diversity, equity, inclusion. As is shown in that report. We're confident that some of that cost may be covered through, or some of that need may be covered through existing resources, and the additional money that will likely be recommended for consideration by council, the additional appropriation, I think would actually occur before January. We have created an organizational diversity, equity, inclusion committee. I believe those recommendations will be coming over the next several months. We've made some changes. I've made some changes with human resources, and the new general services, enterprise services director and staff are developing some specific actions to advance our diversity, equity, inclusion work, and those are what we're attempting to summarize in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Secretary Anderson.
Thank you very much. This is, again, a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think 5E is my motion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And City Manager Powers and I have had a number of email discussions that the mayor has been, some have been shared with him and some have been shared with Councilor Gonzalez. And I want to discuss this more, but I think maybe the time to discuss it is at my motion, especially in terms of how do we use these $300,000 funds, especially in light of, the clear recommendation on using the ARPA funds is not for continuing program costs, but for one-time or capital kind of cost. And that relates to this issue that I could discuss now, but I think it's more appropriate to discuss in 5E.
I think you're correct about when the conversation should be had. I wonder, Josh, maybe you want to take an attempt at explaining how we should think about this document. I don't see this as, when I read through it, I didn't see it as changing what we had talked about in the past in terms of there's a collection of funds that have been identified to reimburse the city for lost revenues, some identified to reimburse the city for COVID-specific costs, and then there's a section of money that's going to be allocated into the trust and agency account. And what I saw this as being is we have some ideas about what the trust and agency account could be put towards, and it's things like this.
Yes.
Can you
correct.
comment on that, or do you have anything more to say about it?
Sure. So this is a proposed framework for allocating those funds going forward. So again, our whole $32.9 million is in the budget. This is just a framework to possibly allocate that balance.
And if I may, Chairperson, certainly, and I think this will be, again, something that council will consider, certainly some of the smaller organizational pieces may very well come from what is right now in the amount to make sure the city's services are covered. Because, for example, the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion as an ongoing way of doing business, while we're likely going to very likely recommend to council that we have this limited duration emphasis. One of the intended outcome is to then have those systems in place, those resources in place, staff resources that will allow us to continue with that diversity, equity, inclusion work. So that may very well come out of I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's not what's on this report isn't necessarily all going to come from the trust and agency account. Thank you.
That's a good clarification. I guess as I read it, there's too much in here, even for the generosity of the recovery plan for the city to execute from that fund. So I guess what I understand this to be, and I'm the one who asked for more information about it, so I want to check my knowledge. What I see is that through an internal process in the city, you've come up with some ideas about the way that those funds can be used. You won't make a decision about that it'll be up to the council to decide at some future point, we're going to allocate the resources to the projects that they determine to be most appropriate.
Correct. And also a member Hoy had I think a similar question, Chairperson Tigan, and I do want to emphasize, as it's stated in the report, that it's really going to flow though from established city council policies and plans, our strategic plan, the policy agenda, the plans that feed our infrastructure spending. And yes, to answer your question directly, those will be decisions made by city council.
Okay, well, thank you for providing the information. I thought it was a very thorough and fascinating read. Lot to ponder. Other comments or questions for the staff regarding the reports that we have, the information items? I'm going to switch over on mine. I don't see everybody at once, I don't think. Okay, Member Anderson, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick point of question. I actually have a motion to make also, but I didn't know we were supposed to email it. So is it still going to be possible to make a motion if I hadn't previously emailed it? I apologize for that mistake.
We will certainly entertain motions from the floor at the appropriate time.
Okay.
And Member Anderson, I just did mine for various reasons. You don't have to do that way, but I wanted to get it out to people before the meeting. That was all.
Great. Thank you.
If we can't do Robert's rules on the fly, I don't think we're worth our salt. So yeah, definitely motions on the fly. Member Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on that, I wanted to make sure people saw we got a lot of last minute additions to the budgetary information today. And that includes the detailed proposal for a mobile response unit. The initial city staff information gave us the number, but we now have the detailed proposal, which I know a number of folks were interested in seeing. And so I look forward to discussing that at an appropriate time and bringing a motion at an appropriate time later this evening. And I also see the capital improvement plan is on our agenda, not surprisingly, and I declare a potential conflict of interest since my family owns property in the city of Salem. So I just want to get that out of the way before I forget. So potential conflicts mean you can still participate in the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Nordyke. Okay, I think if we're done with this portion of the meeting, we'll continue through the agenda. We do not have any public hearings tonight, so we can move right on to item number 7, the special orders of business. And we are at the point in the Budget Committee process to finalize a recommendation of the city's and the Urban Renewal Agency's budget to the City Council. To aid in this process, Budget Officer Josh Eggleston will present an overview of the special orders of business. So Josh will
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes.
We're not going to get to item 5E, or we're going to do item 5E after agenda item 7? I mean, that's fine with me.
If I
yeah, please.
Secretary Anderson, or anyone else who might have a motion, consider what results area it might be heard under. So when we get to that results area, you could have a motion that's included in that results area for the budget recommendation.
Yeah, sorry, that I should have made that a little clearer. Sorry, Secretary Anderson. We'll move through, Josh will walk us through. We'll approve each of the results areas as they were presented to us over the last couple of evenings. And then we can entertain motions that change for each one of those results areas. Josh, why don't you walk us through each item one at a time, and we'll take a motion to follow.
Thank you, Chair Tigan. I've listed the four main tasks for the committee this evening on this slide. The first is the approval of the property tax levy for the Urban Renewal Agency, followed by deliberations and a recommendation of the Urban Renewal Agency budget. The third item is approval of the City of Salem property tax levies, followed by deliberations and recommendation of the City of Salem budget by result area, as you heard from the chair. The first special order of business this evening is the approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency property tax levy. Oregon budget law requires this budget committee to separately specify the ad valorem property taxes for the URA and the City of Salem. Staff recommends that the budget committee approve the Salem Urban Renewal Agency estimated ad valorem property taxes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Eggleston. I'm looking for a motion for approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Area's fiscal year 2022 ad valorem property taxes. Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, I'll go
Member
ahead
Bennett?
and, move that the approval of the 2022 Salem Urban Renewal Agency ad valorem property taxes
Thank you.
motion that you talked about. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Lewis, for a second.
No, it was Ross.
Oh, thank you, Member Chirac, for a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the Salem Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 2022 ad valorem property tax, vote by signify your vote by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any objections? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Josh, can you please walk us through item 7B?
Just one second. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next is the approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget. Oregon budget law requires the budget committee to separately approve and recommend the Urban Renewal Agency budget to the Urban Renewal Agency board. Staff recommends that the approval and recommendation of the Urban Renewal Agency Executive Director's proposed budget. Thank you.
I'll move the staff report on that.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Member Bennett, for a motion, and second by Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? Not hearing any discussion. To vote to signify to approve this motion, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? And the motion for the approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 2022 budget passes unanimously. Thank you. Josh, can you walk us through item 7C?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next is the approval of the City of Salem property tax levies. Oregon budget law requires the budget committee to separately specify the ad valorem property taxes for the URA and the City of Salem. Staff recommends that the budget committee approve the City of Salem estimated ad valorem property taxes for both the permanent rate and the general obligation bond debt levy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a motion from the floor to approve the City of Salem's fiscal year 2022 ad valorem property tax.
I move approval.
Thank you, Member Chirac.
I'll second.
And a second from Member Bennett. Any discussion? Secretary Anderson.
Thank you very much. I don't have the screen up in front of me, but the top one was about our permanent fixed tax rate of 5 point something, something, something. Perhaps it might be helpful to explain to the budget committee members, as well as some of the newer councils, how we got stuck with this rate and then how it compares to other cities in the state of comparable population, which might have a higher rate. I'm specifically thinking of Eugene because the rate totally affects our budgetary funds.
It does. So back in the late 90s, measures 5 and 50 were passed in Oregon, and they set a permanent rate. It had a look back period, and it set a permanent rate at whatever levy rate each city had. So for example, Eugene had been levying a higher rate, so they ended up with a higher permanent rate. Salem, we ended up with kind of a mid-range, but I should note there are also counties and cities that relied heavily on timber revenue, and they had a very, very low permanent rate. And now that timber revenue is gone, and they still have that very, very low rate. So we're both fortunate to have the rate we have, but there are cities with a higher permanent rate out there. Thank you for the opportunity. Always fun.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other consideration of this motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion to approve the City of Salem's fiscal year 2022 ad valorem property tax rate is approved unanimously. Members, the final item this evening is the approval and recommendation of the city budget. This approval is structured to happen by result area as it has been presented to us by the city staff. And the first result area we'll see this evening is good governance. Member Hoy, see your hand.
Sorry, I'll wait for, I didn't realize Josh was going to do a presentation first. I can go after that.
Thank you.
Not really a presentation, just a simple slide to remind everyone what's included in good governance in case you did have a motion that included one of these divisions or departments.
Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the Budget Committee recommend $25,000 be allocated for Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation for all City Council meetings, period.
Second.
We have a member on the floor regarding Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation services from Member Hoy and a second from Member Nordyke. Thank you. Any discussion from the floor?
Thank you, Chair Tigan. So this is something that's been a priority of mine for quite some time. I think that having it simulcast in Spanish as well as having regular interpretation services is absolutely critical. I was actually stunned that the number was as low as it is. And so I'm very happy to make this motion and urge all of my colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Member Hoy. Additional conversation about the motion?
Gracias.
Thank you, Member Gonzalez. Member Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say that I look forward to voting yes for this. This is what DEI looks like in action, right? So many people ask, what does this look like? And this is a great example of what that looks like. So thanks for bringing this forward.
Okay, seeing no other points for discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Are there any questions of the staff or any other discussion related to the good governance result area from the committee members? This is your bite at the apple, so I will wait maybe a few seconds more than is comfortable. Okay, I'll take a motion from the floor to approve the City of Salem's fiscal year 2022 good governance result area budget.
And if as amended.
As amended. Thank you. As amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Member Hoy. I hear a second from Member Anderson. Thank you. Any additional deliberation on that motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? That motion passes unanimously. The next area to approve is natural environment stewardship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This total for this result area is just over $20 million. Includes climate action plan, environmental education, environmental monitoring, and environmental compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eggleston. Are there any questions of the staff or any other discussion related to the natural environment stewardship result area? Secretary Anderson.
I move adoption of the budget for the natural environment area.
Thank you for the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Member Chirac, for the second. Any discussion on that motion?
I do have some, and it relates to the climate action plan. Members Nordyke and Gonzalez and I are council members on that plan, and there are 35 other members of the Climate Action Task Force. And we're not yet done with our deliberations, and we haven't yet presented the plan to achieve our goals to the council. And when we do, there may well need be some sort of amendment to the budget, but we're just not there yet. So that's why I think I move to approve the budget as is now.
Okay, thank you for that information. Other discussion of the motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. The third area tonight will be safe community. Mr. Eggleston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. $131.6 million. It has court, police emergency response, WVCC, the 911 call center, radio communications, fire and emergency response, EMS, and building and safety. Thank you.
Member Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to amend the Safe Community budget to include $500,000 for a community mobile response unit.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Member Nordyke and a second from Vice Chair Leung. Discussion on this motion, Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the maker of the motion would entertain a question, I'm confused by the dollar amount because that's not how I read the proposal from United Way. Can you clarify the number for us and where you came to that?
Sure. So I anticipate that we would be sharing expenses with United Way. And the total amount is $542,000. My belief is that we can get the United Way to support 42 of the $500,000. And based on and again, this is a draft proposal, which I expect will depend on how it actually plays out. But, you know, if the budget committee would feel more comfortable paying, you know, setting aside that full amount and then dialing it back in the event that we have a partner who would like to pony up some of that money, we can do that. But the idea is to budget for the amount that I think we would be on the hook for, and maybe then some. So, but I'm flexible on the amount.
Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm confused. I had understood that United Way is proposing that this would be their program that we would contribute to, and it sounds like you're proposing something different than that. Can you clarify?
Yeah, no. This is consistent with the United Way. I just spoke with them today, and I've spoken with them many times. The idea is to make sure that we have money in the budget to make this happen. If we end up using less than that, great. We sometimes have that in budgets where we end up having savings. But the key is to get the ball rolling. And the key is to make sure that we have the funding to initiate a program for 1 year. And we can continue speaking with United Way about what that looks like. But the idea is to put the money in this program now so that we can finally get it started.
Member Hoy.
I'm really not trying to be difficult, but I don't understand what you're suggesting. Are you suggesting that it'll be a City of Salem program that
No.
we include United Way with, or is this a United Way program that we would contribute to? I just want to make sure I understand the proposal.
Yeah, it's a United Way program that we contribute to. So we're not hiring the staff ourselves. United Way is, and we may end up just cutting them a check. That's what I anticipate would most likely happen. But we need to appropriate funds to figure out how that would work. But again, as I see it, if you've looked at the proposal that United Way submitted, it would talk about creating where they would be hiring the EMTs, they would be hiring the staff, they would be providing the van. This would not be creating additional FTEs for the City of Salem, which is why my motion is not about new FTEs. It's about creating a budgetary item. It's about earmarking the money in the budget. So when fiscal year 2022 arrives, that money is sitting there and it's ready for usage. But no, we're not, their detailed proposal is not about the City of Salem hiring anybody.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I think that's important. Other discussion regarding the motion?
Right, and we got a little bit off track. I do want to speak to my motion before we open it up to questions, if that's all right with the chair.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I want to make sure folks understand how important this is to our community. First of all, I want to point out that we received over 96 public comments on this subject matter. That does not include the oral comments. On social media, a petition's been circulated that generated over 730 signatures within a short period of time. You've seen business owners speak up in support of a mobile response unit and how they would appreciate the opportunity to call a mobile response unit in times when they would not call police or fire to address a situation. We've heard from mental health professionals who have spoken up and demonstrated the need for this service. We've heard from folks who work with our in-shelter population on a daily basis. All of them have spoken and urged our support for this. We also know, based on some other things from the United Way proposal, that this can free up our emergency rooms and our fire department for higher acuity calls. You saw in the materials that there can be 5 to 15 calls for service that result in a trip to the ER, and that doesn't necessarily have to happen. When you have medical personnel in the unit, like an EMT, they can handle basic first aid, wound care, and other basics. That means you save a trip to our emergency room in the area. And we also save the time and expense of tying up more expensive professionals like the paramedics at the fire department or our police officers. And the reality is, when you are talking to people as part of a mobile response unit, these calls can be time intensive. It takes time to build rapport with persons struggling with trauma. So this can reduce the response time for our fire department if they're not busy handling this call, and it frees them up for the higher acuity calls that is better suited to their training. The same goes for our police officers too. You saw in the materials that there are over 5,000 welfare check calls that are made every single year, at least based on the most current information. And welfare checks are bread and butter for mobile response units like the one in Eugene. And the materials among the materials handled, there is some discussion about these types of calls could be likely candidates for referral to a non-police response unit. Again, it can free up our officers for things that they're better suited for and trained for. So again, I feel like we've provided the detailed proposal this time. We've heard from a huge number of people in the community that are urging us to adopt this. We have the time and the resources to do this, and it's high time we do. And that's my speech for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nordyke. Member Bennett.
Thank you. One of the questions I have on it is, are we then abandoning our ask of the state? We have a couple of different asks in for well in excess of the kind of money you're talking about. Should we now withdraw those?
No, those are matching funds, and that's not guaranteed money. And I think it's important to plan for contingency.
It's matching what? I'm not sure how you're doing that.
I'm happy to explain. If you may recall from our last budget meeting, I mentioned House Bill 2417. House Bill 2417 provides matching funds up to a certain point, but that's going to be a competitive process. It's not guaranteed and it's not free. It's matching. So no,
those were the funds then you're watching?
So
are those the funds you were watching, Vanessa?
Our budget committee meeting, Mayor, where we last week's meeting. That's what I was referring to.
Oh.
So no, we shouldn't be abandoning it. Here's the
okay, because we're going to have a legislative committee meeting, and we've been following both state and federal budgeting bills that we've been asking for funding for this program in, and you're asking for 500. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page doing the program, because this is going to be a very important program.
Sure. So if it's not in the budget, it doesn't exist. Right now, there's nothing in the budget for a mobile response unit. And so I'm asking the budget committee to set to their opinion. Do you think it should be included in our budget? That's what a budget committee does. They make recommendations. And since
thank you.
It's not in, let me finish. Since it's not in the budget, it should be included in the budget. And here's the analogy I was about to say. Let's say your sink is broken and the plumber comes and he says, all right, it's going to take between $300 and $500 to fix it. Well, if you are careful with your money, if you're budgeting for your household, you're going to budget for $500. And if it turns out you don't need $500 and you get it fixed for less, great. But in order to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars, we need to budget. And if it turns out we don't need the money, great. But if it's not in the budget, it doesn't exist.
I would disagree with you on your basic premise, except that I know we want this program. I'm not sure attaching a dollar amount really resolves the issue. I can see what you're saying, though. I just think you're mistaken in your understanding of the budgeting process.
Member Hoy.
Thank you. And continuing with the analogy, if you needed some plumbing work done and your uncle offered to pay for it or suggested that they might pay for it and you went ahead and paid for it on your own out of your own checking account, what would the incentive be for the uncle to come forward with the cash? And that's the situation I think we're in here. And so I very much support this. I've been on record supporting this for a long time. I'm just not wanting to allocate resources that might not be necessary. And to say that if it's not in the budget, it doesn't happen, well, okay, but we can amend the budget at any time during the year that these resources would become available. So I guess that's my concern, is that we're potentially double spending or double allocating this money.
There would be no double spending. And I'm sure that any funds that we don't use, we would hold in reserve. We already have reserves, so having money available in reserve is a good thing. We're asking for a recommendation. Recommendations include what is important, what do we care about, where are we willing to invest in our community. And so these recommendations from the budget committee matter. And it's up to all of our members of the budget committee to tell Salem City Council whether they think this is worthy of budgeting for. And if we end up getting resources later, great, but that's not a guarantee. And that's a piece of pending legislation, which is not law. Anything can happen in the legislature, as we know. So it's not a done deal. And I'm merely asking for a recommendation. If we end up not needing the money, that is fantastic news.
Member Bennett, quickly, and then I'll go to Member Brown, who's got his hand up.
Again, Councillor, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think you're misunderstanding how the funding process is underway. We're looking at one uncle and an aunt here. We've got a couple of places where we're looking for a substantial amount of money to make sure this program works. And I'm afraid you're lowballing it and your pipes are going to leak on this thing. So my suggestion would be, if you feel confident, just put it in, just a motion to put it into the budget without a dollar amount yet attached leaves it open for us to continue the work we're doing to get really substantially more money than you're talking about.
Thank you, Member Bennett. Member Brown?
Thank you, Chair. I really want to give my floor time to Member Bennett because I really want to hear more about this process because just how it does work. Because for me, where I sit, I'm struggling between some of these analogies we've used. So I'm not going to go toward the analogies. If you could just keep it real and keep it simple so I can understand what it is that we're missing. So I'm going to yield my time to Member Bennett because I want to hear this.
Is that okay?
Member Bennett, please. Yeah, or we can also ask for a clarification from the city staff. What would be the impact of putting a dollar amount to it or not putting a dollar amount to it? I think that would be another place to get information.
Yeah, we're seeking funding primarily through I'm going to say it wrong, I'm sure, the Recovery Act funding coming out of Washington, D.C. There's a huge amount of money coming into the state, into the city, into the county, and we're working at several points along the way to get those funds and try to get the share that we need. I think one of the problems we've had is exactly how much do we need to raise in order to set up the right program and to give it durability over the next couple of years. So we've been asking in a couple of places for like 400,000 here, 800,000 here, all for the same program aimed at really looking for substantial financing for this. And so I worry that if we go in at 500 of our own money, the first question is, well, you're already in for 500. We'll just lower this. And we've seen that happen before. So I just think the understanding, because so many of us have been involved in this over the years, getting this project off the ground, I would just ask that we just submit that we're going to do it from the budget committee, that it's in our budget with $1, it doesn't matter, but not indicate how much we can spend out of our general fund at this point for this kind of project. Those general fund dollars are very scarce. Right now, that federal money isn't.
Thank you, Member Bennett. Member Lewis?
Yeah, let me try to put my understanding this way. I think this is a time for the city to look very poor to folks that may be helping us, the state of Oregon, the federal government, excuse me, even Marion County. Member Nordyke, you've mentioned a couple of times, rightfully so, that Marion County is getting a whole lot more money than the city of Salem. If I'm Marion County and I see the city of Salem putting in $500,000, that's a relief for me as a county commissioner, because then I don't have to do that. So I think I think universally agree that this is a project that we all want, but it's a matter of timing and waiting to see where we may be getting funding so we can use our monies other places.
Thank you, Member Lewis. Member Stapleton?
Thank you, Chair. So just a question on how this would work going forward. So if we did put it as a line item without any money attached, and then at a later date, county, state, feds would give money, that would go into that line item to be spent on that. And then when United Way was ready, they would come to us with a proposal, and at council, we would accept that. Is that how this would work?
I think that's a good description of it.
Okay.
Or the other reality is the commitment's there to this program. There's no question about it that the council has consistently indicated it's committed to this program. Nothing happens. Nothing works out. The whole thing blows up. We'll just go and get the 500,000 or whatever we need from contingency funds. The council can do that. But budget this at the time you've actually got a real understanding of what kind of funding opportunities you've got. keep it, keeping that option open.
I saw Member Anderson's hand, and I see Secretary Anderson. Member Anderson, did you have something to add to the discussion?
Mayor Bennett actually just answered it. Thank you.
Okay. Secretary Anderson.
Thank you very much. Obviously, this is something that we all have supported for many years. When I first came on the council in 2015, I was talking about it and others were talking about it, and it's a dire need. And I appreciate the spontaneity of the petitions and the letters and cards that we received, but I am interested from the staff in hearing, is this possible as a budgetary matter to put it in the budget and to just put some kind of token amount, and at that point it's in the budget, it expresses the budget committee's recommendation to the council that we move forward, and at the same time we move forward with the state funds and the ARPA money and all the money that is coming, state and county funds that is coming here. Is that theoretically possible under the budget to just put a token amount in?
Yes.
Member Chirac.
Thank you, Chair Tigan. Does anybody know whether the United Way proposed program would have the ability to bill insurance if one of the client patients needing their help had insurance or Medicare, any Oregon health plan, any form of insurance, which then, could of course backfill some of the costs?
Thank you. Gretchen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Teagan and Member Chirac. The short answer is maybe, but we're not sure yet. That was a part of the system analysis that we were working towards. You have to have an established patient, and it would depend upon the relationship between the United Way's staff and their medical provider and whether that patient was lined in with that. Some services would potentially be billable. I've been warned that many would not be. And we're still sorting all of that out. There's also the federal Widen Cahoots Act that we're paying attention to that has the potential to open up Medicaid and Medicare. And we want to watch how that federal piece works and ensure that the service would be set up to maximize those resources as well for Medicare and Medicaid.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. I do see Member Sund, your hand as well. I guess my follow-up question on the program from the United Way is it scalable? Like, let's say I think it seems like there's a lot of agreement about the need for the program. Let's say we agree about it so much that it's worth $500,000 of our general fund, which some of us may think that's the case. And we get $500,000 from our uncle and our aunt, sorry, Member Brown, from the United States government and the state of Oregon or Marion County. Is United Way prepared to present us a $1 million pilot or a $1.5 million pilot? I think for a lot of people, it's more than a $500,000 issue that we face. It's a $1.5 million issue, if not more.
So having spoken with United Way recently, I'm not going to commit them above and beyond the proposal that they have, but I would point out that the pilot budget breaks it down by the number of EMTs and QMHPs that you hire. So you could start with a small program that's one EMT and one QMHP, and it would be about 300 grand. Under one of the proposed budgets they have, you could have two of each. So you could have multiple shifts, and they even included in their proposal what that schedule would even look like. So yeah, you can hire more people as a general rule, and that would just mean that they would be able to cover more ground. We're a big city, and we have 160,000 plus people here. So I do believe it is scalable, but that would of course depend on how many people you can realistically hire. But since it's predominantly about FTEs and a van, yes, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Member Sund.
Thank you, Chair, and let me lower my hand there. And thank you, Member Nordyke, for bringing forward this proposal. And I've seen a lot of quite a bit of conversation in the community, both social media and reading through all of the public testimony. It's very clear to me that we need to do something yesterday. At the end of 2019, our downtown became very unsafe. Early into 2020, it was no different. The pandemic created a different problem, of course, and opening camps and the ban on gatherings of 2 or more and things like that. We started to see the problem, or I guess the unfortunate scenario that we find our community members in shifting into other places, but continuing to grow. I read through the Lodging Association feedback about this, and I guess I have two, and a lot of the feedback from community members, and my two concerns are, one, I think there's a general misunderstanding of who pays for what. Over and over again, $8 million that the city of Eugene has saved. It's unclear to me. I know that some of that is police, for sure, probably a great deal of that. But there's constantly referring to ambulance transports and emergency room treatments. And I would just hope that we would be able to set that aside, because there was obviously a response from the city staff regarding who pays for that. Of course, the city does not pay for emergency room treatments, and Falk, the ambulance transport, attempts to bill insurance, and if not, in many cases, those are either written off or go to collections or the Oregon Health Plan. So I think it's important to understand, the savings of that. It's not really clear to me the hard dollars, that this would save. That being said, I find that this program, that we need to do something yesterday. I really, really do think that. And if we're going to do it, if the city's going to do it and the council's going to do it, and you want to do something that you don't at 16 months from now, it's very easy to start a program. It's very hard to stop a program, because you're gonna insert into our community services that are going to be vitally crucial for those community members living on the street. And then if in 16 months, let's say we're earmarking ARPA funds, for example, which a lot of the community feedback seemed to mention. Let's say we're earmarking that to say we're going to use some of this. Well, the van in the proposal was $28,000 out of the $542,000. So the majority of these funds are ongoing funds. So you come to the end of, the use of, let's say you did want to use some of those funds, and now the general fund. So you really just need to look at it like the general fund is what's going to fund this, if this is how we're going to do it. And obviously, had ARPA not happened and COVID not happened, this budget committee process would be very different. The conversation about the general fund and the Thelma and Louise would be very different, as it has been in the last couple of years that I've had the pleasure of being on this committee. And it's great that we have this influx of cash, but I worry that that we won't be able to sustain it. That's my concern. I think the program needs to happen. So what I'm hearing from others is, another analogy, you could have a piece of cake or the whole cake, maybe, if there's an opportunity for a larger amount of state, county, federal funding that could fund something not only on the one time, but in the ongoing, that we would get what everybody wants in a way that achieves the goal, the outcomes that we're looking for. I do worry about jeopardizing that by just simply rushing to do something, or not, in the budget, although it doesn't feel like rushing, because this is something that's been talked about for a long time. So I really struggle with this very much, to be honest, really how I would, vote on this, because from a budgetary perspective, I think that it sounds like the city is so close to potentially finding funding to address homelessness in a broad, not just services, but services and space, that, I'd hate to jeopardize that. But at the same time, I could also see the perspective of, who cares? We need to do something, and we need to do it yesterday. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. I enjoyed listening to everybody's conversation around this, and I know this is very sensitive, But this is a tough one. But I do appreciate it being brought up, and I think it cannot go away. The city is in dire need of doing more. It just seems like the timing of this right now it's difficult for me to get behind it. But again, I struggle with it. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Member Sund. Secretary Anderson.
Thank you very much. At the risk of making this even more complicated, I'm going to bring up something else, and that is something that the council has been talking about for quite some time. And I don't think we've made much traction with the management and the police department, but one of the sort of trade-offs is if you have a mobile response unit, you may not need as many police responses to situations that don't need to have an armed sworn officer there. And we look at page answer number 2 to agenda item 5B, the update, where it says how many welfare checks do police handle? And what they say is about 388 welfare checks a month. The calls come in like that, and they say 100 of them are ones that could be handled by cahoots. So that's 1/4 of the calls that are handled by police that could be handled by a mobile response unit. And that is something that we are going to continue to have ongoing discussions with the chief of police and the city manager and how that affects police staffing. So I guess I'm all in favor of this, but it's a whole lot of balls. But I agree with Councilor Nordyke if it's not, the importance of having something in the budget. Right. So I'm going to ask the maker of the motion if she would be willing to just instead of $542,000, which I see she got from the same, answer sheet, to say some token amount, and I'm not sure what the token amount should be from a budgetary point of view, and make that motion to the council.
So I would be fine with that, because what I'm hearing is that people think that we might get money falling out of the sky from unguaranteed sources. And we're talking pending legislation, and there's no guarantee that money will be there. To me, if you want, for any fund, it's important to earmark money so that you are being conscientious of the costs that you have on your plate. When I know costs are coming for me financially, I put money aside. And I may not know exactly how much it's going to be, but I know that I've made the prudent financial choices to set money aside. So I'm willing to allow and support a friendly amendment, because what I'm hearing is that everyone here is willing to support getting this unit going. And for the most part, everyone wants it to get going ASAP. And I would not be surprised if United Way comes to us saying, we're ready to go immediately. In fact, I believe, will want us to get this program going by August 1, which by then, if the state legislature passes that money, and if we get our grant application in time, and if we are lucky enough to qualify for a competitive grant matching process, if all those contingencies are met, then yeah, maybe we won't have to pay much at all. But that's why I had framed it at such a high amount, in hopes that we might not end up using any close to much of it at all. So yes, I do expect we'll hear more on that. And yeah, I would support that friendly amendment with that understanding in mind.
Yeah. Then, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask staff, what's the appropriate amount to put in there as a placeholder? I mean, $1 seems kind of foolish, or I don't know. And so I don't know. What should we put in there?
The earlier staff reports and also in the ARPA framework that was provided to you, that there is a recommendation to set aside a match. So I think, as far as showing the importance to the community of this mobile response unit, and not weaken our opportunities with the state legislature specifically. Setting aside $135,000 would be, I think, somewhat consistent with what I'm hearing from this discussion.
Thank you, Manager Powers. Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify for committee members that the characterization that money might fall out of the sky is not accurate. Some of us have been working very hard. The legislative committee has been working very hard to secure funding for this project. And we've spent a lot of our hours doing just that. And it wouldn't be money falling out of the sky. It would be the product of a lot of conversations and intensive work with our legislative delegation. And so I would fully support the suggested friendly amendment.
Thank you, Member Hoy. Member Davis.
I just wanted to echo Member Sund. I have it's kind of similar concerns with the whole thing. Everybody knows we need this. I mean, there's no question about that. But if we do a knee-jerk, sorry, I'm trying to think of how to put that. If we just throw it in the budget, we have it, we get it started. I'm concerned about those people that it's going to be serving, getting those services, and then they disappear. Same thing. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of uncertainty about the program. Nobody really knows how much it's going to cost. I'm hearing a lot about cahoots, but how we're not going to be like cahoots. It just seems like it's not mature enough to put on the table as we're ready to go. And I get putting it in the budget. Okay, we have the item, but my question is there any reason why, if the funds do fall from the sky and all of a sudden we have this money that we can start the program and we know it's going to stay strong, why couldn't we just do it at that point? Why do we have to do it now when everything's kind of in the air? That's.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate this discussion. It's been very helpful for me, new to this process, to kind of understand what's going on. I just want to say two things. I mean, in general, I support this now, like the concept of the friendly amendment that we're discussing to the original motion. We absolutely need a mobile crisis response unit here in our community, but we absolutely need the stakeholders to step up and pay their fair share. We need the state, the county, and the federal government to pick up a large portion of this tab so that it has the best long-term future possible. And I think that this friendly motion is the best way to do that. So I appreciate the work and the discussion. I appreciate the people who put the time in. You know, Councilor Nordyke has from day one been really big on this. I appreciate that, but I appreciate everybody who's been spending years to get us to this point. So this is a big deal. I'm happy we're having this discussion, and I'm happy to support the friendly motion that's before us.
Okay, thank you, Member Phillips. Member Bennett.
I'll make that friendly motion so we can talk about it. And I would just change I think I could do it easily by just changing the amount proposed in Councilor Nordyke's motion to 135,000. Does that still go does that all go together? Okay, I'll move that.
Second.
Okay, thank you for the amendment to the motion, Member Bennett, and the second, Member Hoy. Additional discussion on the motion as amended, changing the amount from.
I think the numbers, I'm going to go with the city manager. He knows the budget, his budget process better than anybody. But I join Councilor Hoy in the characterization of money falling from the sky. It won't be money falling from the sky. It will be a matter of some very hard work by all of us working with our delegations to get assistance. And I think it will also give us all a chance to have had a real live opportunity to understand what the program is we're talking about. This has not been, it's one of the problems with free-floating motion making is if you don't kind of do the spade work, you're not sure what people are talking about. I have yet to see anything about this in writing. So I'll look forward to that opportunity and get a chance to study it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Member Bennett. The maker of the motion, Member Nordyke.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion, and I appreciate the desire to see if we can get people to help throw some skin in the game. I do appreciate that. There is a detailed proposal that explains how this program would work in your materials, but it was submitted late in the day. I think it was sent out at as an email 3:30 p.m. Yeah, but if you haven't read it yet, it discusses in detail what exactly it would look like in terms of 11 hours a day, 4 QMHPs. Member Sun mentioned this earlier, budgeted down to vehicle maintenance and phone costs and travel and insurance and things like that. So this is a very detailed proposal. Yeah. And I feel like that is the level of detail that makes me feel confident that it is time to make this recommendation. But I really appreciate the discussion, everyone. This has been very helpful to me, and I think helpful to our community. So I will be absolutely supporting the friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Powers.
Thank you, Chairperson Teigen. Since there's a specific reference to the document that's in your packet, and I don't mean, it's not necessarily to correct or disagree with anything that's been said, but I would, caution relying on what was received. It's referring to 2 agencies, which I understand, and I might have to put Gretchen Bennett on the spot here, from that systems analysis work that was going on until last Friday, frankly. Arches is not interested. Community Action Agency is not interested. They're mentioned in there. Alluvium is not operating, so they're mentioned in there. So while the framework for the budget may very well be accurate, the proposal itself is, in my judgment, needs some work in response to the mayor's point regarding, what is it that will ultimately be launched. The details may be there in terms of the specialization of the staff, the estimated cost, but there are still some moving parts to this, which we will attempt per the direction of City Council to try to figure that out, or per the decision tonight, the recommendation tonight from the Budget Committee, leave those details to United Way, and we'll have the funding available when it's necessary. And I just wanted to make that point, since the document has been referred to now several times, that there are, in my judgment, and I think in Gretchen's judgment, there are some factual errors in it.
Ms. Bennett, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. Member Anderson.
Okay, I very, very strongly support the CAHOOTS program, and I would have supported the original motion. I support the amended motion because I'm not an expert on budgeting, so I don't necessarily understand the strategic, logistics. One thing that was said, though, that kind of struck me is one of the federal legislation from Ron Wyden is really based off of the Eugene program, and he's really promoting it. Hopefully there's federal funding. I just wonder if the city of Salem were to approve, say, the $500,000, and we had it going as a pilot program, and we file a grant application, would they really say, oh, in this city, they already have it allocated, and so we're not going to give them the money? I just don't know that the federal program being so big, I don't even know if the grant application would ask that question. And if it did ask, I wonder if maybe, and I hope that the city staff will be able to explain this, I would think they might be more inclined to grant money for a program the city is this committed to. But again, I intend to support the friendly motion as well as if the original was there. Thank you.
City Manager Powers.
Just quickly, for clarification, the reference to the federal Wyden bill is to have these mobile community crisis response units be eligible for Medicaid and Medicare funding. It's not a specific grant application for federal funding for a crisis response unit. It's opening up the vast Medicaid and Medicare budgets to programs like this, and that would, as was mentioned earlier during your discussion, would really be key to the ongoing sustainability of this program and potential expansion.
Okay, thank you. We have on the floor the amended motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Eggleston.
Just real quick, it was a motion to amend the motion, so you have to vote on the amendment, and then you have to vote on the original motion as amended. So 2 different votes.
Thank you. Maybe I need a drink of water. Let's take a poll of the floor to see if there's any other further comment on the amendment to the motion? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment to the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Okay, the amendment to the motion passes unanimously. We now return to discussion of the motion as amended. Secretary Anderson.
Just a second. Yeah, thank you. I have another amendment, and I don't know if Robert's Rules of Orders, I should wait till we pass this amendment and add it to the motion, or I should make another amendment to the motion now. I'm going to defer to you, Chair Tigan, unless the city attorney is around.
I think are you asking to make a motion to the current motion on the floor regarding the creation of a mobile unit?
No, but that motion has now been incorporated in the public safety, safe city motion.
No, we still have to vote on the motion to put in a mobile response unit, and then we'll go back to the safe community.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the amendment was only to change 542 to 135. Got it. I'm sorry. See, I knew you'd know the answer.
Well, thank you. That's quite a fair amount of trust for a secretary to put in a chairperson. I appreciate that. Okay, any other further conversation regarding the motion to amend the safe community result area regarding the addition of a mobile response unit? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed by a vote of no. Okay, hearing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we will return to discussion on the safe community result area. Secretary Anderson.
Thank you. As sent out to the committee, I move the Budget Committee recommend to the City Council that one new position of Diversity Recruitment Coordinator for the Salem Police Department and Fire Department be created in the 21-22 budget with funding to be divided equally between the police and fire budgets.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Secretary Anderson and a second from Member Stapleton.
This actually relates to, if I may speak, I presume.
Please, of course.
This actually relates to what we have had a lot of discussion about both today and in other committee meetings and also in other city council meetings, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I first want to say that I sent a bunch of emails around today, and I'm not sure who got copies of all of them, but I want to apologize to City Manager Powers because one of my emails said, he sent me an email saying, here's our concerns about this. And I said, oh, this is the first time I've heard about this. And then I'm looking way back on April 30th, he sent me an email that said something about it. So thank you, Steve, for doing that. And I've already talked to Steve offline and apologized to him. But and my sense of it is the staff is saying, well, this is very important, but what we should do is have a citywide Office of Diversity and Inclusion as opposed to one that is just related to the police department. And then further, that would cost about $150,000 per year for 2 years. And that's why I asked that question about it's not an ongoing expense. So I would say that my motion would also not be an ongoing expense that could not be funded by additions, by the ARPA money or the grant money that we might be getting because the council or the staff is sure that this diversity equity program can then just be folded in. So here's why I want to speak directly to one from the police and fire department. We have had both the Chief Niblack and Chief Womack who are doing an excellent job and are really trying. But if you look at this, I may be incorrect, but I believe we have of 190 sworn officers, 16 women, 8 Latinx, and 1 African American. And so that diversity there is much worse than the diversity in the city as a whole. So, and it's the people who in the law enforcement and public safety who are out there and the public sees them. So they don't see the other 1,000 employees of the city who work in offices and drive around in trucks but don't have day-to-day contact with them. The same thing is true with the fire department. I don't know the exact figures from Chief Niblock, but I would be surprised if they're any better than the what we see in the police department. And finally, this relates also going back to, well, where would the budget money be, and this come out? How would it come out of the police departments? But I think that goes back to the mobile response unit issue. If 1/4 of the calls they get are for things that could be used by the mobile response unit, well, maybe there's some more money that could be freed up there for one position for both departments. And I think it's appropriate for both of them because they're both the sort of the same side of a type of organization. You know, I'm saying this with all due respect, kind of paramilitary organizations. There's command structure and there's much more so than there is in any other part of the city. So it would seem to me that one person could be in charge of recruitment and diversity and equity and split their time between the departments.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Anderson. We have comments from Member Bennett and Member Hoy.
Second.
Member Bennett,
Sorry, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to hear from Chief Womack, and I don't know if Niblock's here. I thought I saw him earlier, and mainly from the city manager who did put out a proposal. I sent a note to Tom when he sent out his amendment asking if it shouldn't really start in the HR and deal with the city as a whole. I've been doing this budget committee for 20 years now, or if not longer, and this has been a consistent discussion throughout that period about the entire city and our really woeful and really difficult process of becoming a far more inclusive organization. And it isn't confined just to police and fire. It's in all levels of the organization. And I thought the way Manager Powers described it made for me more sense in how to do it rather than trying to wedge someone into the two departments who I don't think of as paramilitary. I want to take that off the table. I really don't think that's a fair description of the two departments. But anyway, I really like to hear from Powers, Womack, and Niblock on it.
Yeah, I would too. I want a discussion here, and that's good. That's good.
Thank you.
If I may, and then I'll ask the chiefs to speak to this as well. Thank you for the motion, and certainly thank you for the discussions over the previous budget committee meetings and the discussion with council regarding the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are proceeding, and there will be, as we discussed earlier, a recommendation for council's consideration that I wouldn't characterize it as an office of diversity, equity, inclusion. It's going to be an organization-wide effort to have diversity, equity, inclusion become more important to us as an organization. To have it be part of our whatever, a large organization, a large bureaucracy like the city is. We have 1,200 employees, big budget. We have to institutionalize and have systems in place that will mean that diversity, equity, inclusion become part of what we do, what we measure it. It's important to us. It's as important or even more important to us than safety. And that is where I think this initial push of funding, and we're estimating about $300,000, will help us accelerate that and focus that work, which will be through human resources and also through an organization-wide committee that has been established that is chaired by Peter Fernandez and Yesenia Noriega, and they will then, that committee will be making recommendations that can then be actions that are taken by the organization, or that would result in recommendations to council for some additional funding, perhaps for recruitment. So that's the direction we're going, and there will be a more full and complete report and action plan for council's consideration. I think before Chief Womack and Chief Niblock speak to their department's experiences, I would caution the efficacy of one person. I think I know Chief Womack will say this because he and I discussed this, and I think Chief Niblock's experience is the same, and that is to really do good, intensive recruitment. We're really talking about colleagues, so a sworn officer, a firefighter, not someone that's not a peer of the individuals we're trying to recruit and attract to our organization. So I would caution, I guess maybe in the context of managing expectations, what one position shared by our second and third largest departments would be able to accomplish. And again, Chief Womack and Chief Niblock can speak to their own needs and their experience with the very challenging efforts to increase our diversity to be reflective of our community. I don't know, Trevor, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you. I think you stated that perfectly, City Manager. For us, I do think that if it's a single position that we were trying to share, the value for me would be kind of that HR expertise to the hiring processes, for example, to facilitate those and make them as efficient as possible, make sure there's no barriers in place to our processes, for example. But when it comes to recruiting and developing a specific strategy for police, I think it's going to be definitely different between police and fire. I think Chief Niblock would probably agree that we'd have probably a different approach to recruiting because there's just a different set of job skills and different interests and positions, even though we're both public safety. And so we would need a dedicated, tailored approach for the police department, which for me would involve some full-time recruiters, which would be sworn officers, supported by that shared single HR expertise, helping design strategy. So I just would concur with what you said. I think that if it's a single position, it would probably best rest within HR, with an emphasis overall organizationally, but with some special attention to the police department and fire as well.
Thank you, Chief Womack. Is Chief Niblock with us today?
Yes, I'm here. I of course am in support of any kind of recruiting we can do to increase our diversity. We've been working at this for a long time and could use some help. I agree with what the police chief and the city manager said, that even though police and fire are both public safety, we are different. We're a little specialized, and having an actual person, a sworn uniformed person that can actually go out and recruit in the field is really a valuable tool. We don't have that right now, and so we just make do with what we have. And a lot of us attend things, classes and things to get better at that. But a citywide approach is, the city is being managed that way. A unified approach is probably a good way to do it, and we would appreciate any help we could get in this arena to diversify our workforce. We know we don't represent our community right now as we should.
Thank you, Chief. How about Member Brown and then back to Secretary Anderson?
Thank you, Chair. I do want to just bring something to the space that we discussed last week, and definitely thank you, Secretary Anderson, because you shared this motion with me earlier, so thank you for including me in that. I would want this group to really consider what we're asking this person to do, to really work between two of the largest departments that the city has. And so that's going to be a big job, one. Two, I think it'd be wise for us to also remember that when it comes to doing DEI work is messy. And for those of us that are committed to the cause and we've been in this equity journey for quite a few years, DEI work is messy, especially when there are systems in place that do not allow for change and growth. And so we have to acknowledge that there are some systems in place that may not be as inviting and welcoming for this particular role. And so I think there's value to be said, and this goes back to what Member Bennett said last week. I think there's value to be said when we want to have courageous conversations and we want to hire someone to do DI work, when we haven't done the work we need to have courageous conversations surrounding race. And so I think we have to be wise in that approach. And when I say having courageous conversations about race, what I'm not saying is if you go to a race relations DEI class, and let's say you go to a training and you check that box and you say, hey, I did my training, here's my certificate, I passed. That's not what I'm talking about, because equity work requires daily, every day, having racial consciousness. And I'm going to put this into this space. If you're not a person of color, you do have to practice racial consciousness. And there's a pause right there. As a Black person, I don't have to practice racial consciousness. I wake up in an environment knowing that I am different. I wake up in an environment knowing that I am going to be the minority wherever I go. Whether it's Fred Meyer, or whether it's my job, or whether it's shopping online, or in a meeting like this. And so I think we got to have some really frank conversations with both departments. I'm glad to see both of the chiefs are here, because as you think about this position, something has to be said that work needs to be done in both departments to make sure that the practices, the policies, and the procedures that live within HR are ready to change.
Thank you, Member Brown. I see Member Hoy's hand. Member Secretary, you are kind of held in line. Would you like to defer to Member Hoy?
I defer to Member Hoy.
Thank you. Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a comment before the other folks spoke, but now that I've heard what they had to say, I don't think it changes my comment at all. And that's, I completely support the intent of this motion, but I don't think I support the motion itself. Because I don't think that, I think that recruitment is a symptom of the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think that the city manager's approach is a much better way to deal with the actual problem and not the symptom. And while diversity recruitment is certainly a major problem with at least two of our departments, and I would argue really the whole city, I really feel like it's a bigger issue, like what Dr. Brown just sort of referenced, and that we need to create a culture where this is intrinsic to our culture and not just about recruitment. And I wouldn't want to limit any money that we're going to be spent to just recruitment. And so I would prefer to support the city manager's approach to this rather than the motion as presented.
Thank you, Member Hoy. Member Anderson, then Member Gonzalez.
Okay, I would echo Member Hoy's comments. I definitely agree with the intent here and appreciate the motion, but I think what the city manager said made a lot of sense. So I had a question for the city manager about it. He had mentioned not necessarily an office, but like a committee to deal with this organization-wide. And I wonder if he could comment on, will a member of that committee have any kind of a specialization in police and fire? Because Chief Womack, if I understood him, he talked about that the value would be on an HR person with some, I don't know how to describe it, expertise or specialization or something like that in the police. So does the committee, the planned committee, have somebody that could specifically speak to fire and police?
If I may, Chairperson Tigan, I'd like to call on Krishna Namburi, who's our Enterprise Services Director, and it's really her division, or her vision, working with our human resources staff who developed this proposal, this approach that will be considered by City Council later. And then if she's unable to speak to the committee, because right now there is some separation, and we're working on bringing it together. So if she's unable to speak to the committee, Peter Fernandez can answer questions regarding the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I just want to make sure that our plan is to invest into the DEI program and not necessarily just like one time, but make it like an ongoing practice, like year to year, right? So, and then we want to make this part of the organizational culture. So for your knowledge, for the next year's budget, through the IT and HR consolidation, what we have done, we have taken the savings from that reorganization and have already allocated a certain dollar amount towards this. So the goal is to invest into tools where we can measure the DEI progress. Number two, we are actively looking into what kind of a DEI training that we can provide to the city staff at different levels of the organization, and also how we're going to take that from year to year. So I just want to make sure that we are already kind of looking into that. Our goal is definitely, and we're calling it creating a sustainable recruitment program. I think the focus would be for police and fire, but also for the rest of the city. And also the same thing with creating a sustainable DEI training program for the city where that results into that cultural shift.
Okay, thank you for that response. Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. And Krishna, thank you for that information. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that this kind of recruitment is all of our jobs. It's really the whole city. We should all be pushing towards that. And, just wanted to mention that, being on, having served on the budget committee several years ago, now as a city councilor, the city staff is really welcome. I've been treated fairly. My voice has been raised. I just wanted to put that out there. Now, as regards, I think one of the traps we get into with regards to DEI work is, they're all different. We say it DEI so quickly, but each of these words is like a different world, and but let's say specifically to these two departments, hiring, or at least the results we're looking at. I'm glad that Krishna is bringing up some of this data that we're going to need. I wish we had it yesterday, because the first part is, what does our applicant pool look like? Is that where the issue is? Because then that would be recruitment and outreach. If that pool is solid, but through the hiring process, we're losing them, then maybe we have some biases. Maybe there's some extra barriers that we're putting in the middle, and so they're not getting through that. But if we are hiring them and they're not sticking around, that is the culture. So it really is this whole process of each step. And each step will require different strategies, So even though this seems like it's moving slow, I would say in history we're trying to move fast here. But I definitely want to make get the right information before we do anything. But I also want to put something on the budget now. I do want that too. But I also don't want to fail. I want it to be done right. So.
Yeah, and I think this is Member Gonzalez. I agree with you. This is an important initiative for City Manager Powers, for Public Works Director Peter Fernandez, and all the department heads, including me. So we want to make a difference, right? So with the recruitment, we will be looking into the details of, okay, what is the problem here? Are we not getting enough applications? Or are we not having or do we have a lot of turnover? So we will be looking into those details. For this committee information, we went through that as an IT director, 10 years ago. We were looking at the the pool of applicants that we were receiving. So we realized that we were not really receiving too many. It was very specific about what we were receiving as far as the applicant pool. So we created an internship program, and we actually recruited a lot of students out of high school, college, and we actually kind of prepared them into the workforce. So now our department actually, depending on the positions that we have open, we actually recruit them into our into the IT department, or they go to Amazon, they go to Intel. So we have done that. So to me, I think there is a lot of growth opportunity here. This is a very important initiative for everyone at the leadership level. And I'm giving my commitment that we will be looking into all the details to see what the root cause is, and we work towards like resolving some of these.
Secretary Anderson.
Thank you very much. First of all, I don't have any doubt of the good intentions of all of us in this room and all of the city staff. We're all trying to work toward diversity and equity. And part of that is culture. And Dr. Brown spoke about that very, very clearly and correctly. To me, that's that's not a separate process, but that is an ongoing process that we all need to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all need to look at ourselves and say, what sort of biases do we have? That sort of stuff. But I made this motion because it sure seems to me like it's the police and fire that have the big concern about this as expressed. And I do recall, I like Krishna's idea of the intern program, but I do recall that the police tried to get that going and it didn't really work. And I had one position for both of them because I was trying to save money. And I understand and appreciate exactly what Chief Niblock and Chief Womack are saying. Even though they may be the PM word, they're different organizations. They're different. I'll use the word cultures again, and so it's appropriate to have two. Then I have a question for the city manager, because it sounded sort of like what Chief Womack was saying, and you can this for you too, Chief, is that we would want a sworn officer in the recruitment sort of end of things, and I'm sure Chief Niblack would want a certified firefighter in that position. So are those positions, Steve, that are included in this $300,000, or is that something else? And will there be somebody in the police department who is assigned to this committee or commission and not be full-time and on that job, or somebody in the fire department who would be doing the same? I just want a little clarity on what the program is.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I think what Chief Womack was saying is that he would dedicate sworn officers to recruitment. There aren't any additional sworn officers in the proposed police department budget. There are 1.8 additional staff for an organization of 1,200 employees. So to accomplish what Chief Womack desires, and I think probably equivalent for Chief Niblock, would require additional resources. So those aren't positions that are part of this initiative that Krishna just described. Will there be police and fire involvement? Certainly, and thank you, Chief Niblock, for mentioning our enterprise-wide, our one city approach. I mean, this is a coordinated organization-wide effort, and with the analytical skills of Krishna and that organizational involvement, I'm confident that we will be able to, as has been discussed, you really identify, focus on what are the barriers to each of those three pieces, each of those three components of diversity, equity, inclusion, and then those findings, those recommendations, as I mentioned earlier, could very well result in proposals to a future budget committee, a recommendation to city council sooner, or we're going to continue to do our work to manage with the resources you have allocated to us and free up money through efficiencies and moving overhead resources into more direct support for our organization, like Krishna mentioned. So that's what we'll be doing. But to answer your question specifically, Member Anderson, those fire and police positions are not part of this 300,000, but police and fire will be involved in our organizational efforts to advance, to accelerate our work in DEI.
I see Member Bennett, and then Secretary Anderson.
Thank you. Could I ask the manager a question? I want to kind of understand. Is the $300,000 you've referenced in the budget? I mean, what I'm trying to figure out is what action should we take to essentially memorialize your new program in the budget so we can see it and measure its success over time? How do we identify this? Tom's identified a guy that we could have you call on the carpet anytime. How do we handle this?
Well, you'll call me on the carpet.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I want to be, respectful and consistent. I want to be respectful of the budget committee. Certainly, a robust discussion on one of the previous topics regarding the readiness for your consideration. So I want to be respectful of that. I think Krishna is prepared to take as much time as he would like to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
My intent was to bring that to council because we are viewing this as a limited duration, a multi-year but limited duration expenditure. I was viewing this as part of that American Rescue Plan Act consideration by council. Again, likely, as I mentioned in my response to Member McCoy, likely from the amount that we have within the city budget. So it wouldn't be coming from the trust account. It would really be part of, because again, one of our main points here is we really want to have this be part of our organization and not a one-off.
So, manager, to accomplish your goal, all we have available to us is to defeat Secretary Anderson's motion. Yes. Well, you said you wanted to come on the carpet. I want to hear how this is going to work.
Well, to be consistent with the approach that was taken by the Budget Committee for the Community Response Unit, if you wanted to set aside the $300,000 in the proposed budget with the understanding that it would be coming from the American Rescue Plan Act, because I really appreciate some of the discussion earlier on we continue to have a challenge with funding recurring expenditures. We don't have a needs we don't have a needs problem. We have lots of needs. We have a revenue problem. So we really want to be true and consistent when I advise you, when I propose budgets to the Budget Committee, and then with City Council, that we really need to be very careful not to bring on additional recurring expenditures. So I would recommend, if you do want to take action this evening, that it be $300,000 from the American Rescue Plan, with me hopefully reserving the ability to change that or to provide additional needs when we are more ready to have it be thoroughly vetted by City Council.
Okay. Try to figure out how to say that.
Thank you, Member Bennett. Yeah. Secretary Anderson, is there a comment you wanted to make at this point?
There always is a comment, but I'm going to make this one because this is precisely why I brought this motion before, so we could have this kind of discussion and we can emphasize the importance of us to actually having our city workforce be more reflective of the community. So I have a question for each of the chiefs. The program that has been described by Manager Powers and by IT Manager Namburi, it's in its nascent stage right now, but are each of you confident that this program will move your departments toward more diversity and equity in your respective departments?
Chief Womack?
Yes, short answer for me is yes, but it's so much bigger than that for me. So we've already dedicated on this committee that's been formed, we have a police sergeant that's going to be on that committee. So we will definitely have a voice, we will participate, we will glean information from that process ourselves specific to our department. But internally within the department, there's many efforts and initiatives that I have in mind that I'm going to be working on as far as the culture of the organization and a transformational nature of that over a period of several years. So that's going to be in addition to anything that comes out of this organization-wide DEI work.
I have no doubt of that, Chief, and both chiefs, and that's why I said the culture change is something that goes hand in hand with the diversity and inclusion and recruitment issue. Chief Niblack.
Let me get off of mute there. Yes, I agree. I think this would be a positive addition. Our department has gone through a cultural change over the last 10 years. We've been working on culture for 10 years. And, you know, change is slow in organizations sometimes, but we've been studious about working on that. And we're approaching our 10th year, and we have seen some remarkable changes in our organization. I know that in our organization, it's a recruitment issue and the people in the pool, not necessarily them coming and not staying, or, you know, they're just not there in the pool to hire. So I know that if we could get some recruitment efforts out there, get the word out, it's a great job, you know, and then we could see more diversity in our workforce.
Okay, with that in mind, and with the approval of the seconder of my motion, I would like to withdraw that motion and make a new motion, which would be that I move that we include in the budget for this year $150,000 from ARAPA funds for a limited duration recruitment and DEI coordinator. And that goes to what the staff had said. And I said 150, not 300,000, because 300,000 was 2 years. And I think we can only budget out 1 year.
And just to clarify, this would be a modification of your good governance recommendation, since HR is in good governance.
Sure.
Second.
Thank you. So a motion from Member Anderson, after withdrawing his previous motion, a new motion to add $150,000 to the good governance area for the purposes outlined and seconded by Member McCoy. Any additional comments on your motion, Secretary Anderson?
No, I've said enough.
Okay, Member Brown, your hand was up before the motion, and I'll bring it back to you.
I don't have any motions to present, so that's good. I'm going to leave that up to Secretary Anderson. He does a good job of that. And to both of the chiefs, I really appreciate your clarity about what it is that you want to do. And also to Krishna, is that right? Krishna, am I pronouncing it right? And I get that this is not an easy task. It's not an easy task. One thing I would like this group to consider is that when we start creating spaces where marginalized groups and marginalized populations can show up, I think we got to be mindful that that space is also healthy and that person feels welcome to enter into that space. And I share that with this group because we have to be mindful of that. For example, if I were to ask anyone on Josh's staff, you know, if you were to go through your staff and just disaggregate the data when it comes to how many people of color, you know, work on your team, that should be something that everyone should know, right? How many people of color are on your team? And if we can't answer that question, I think we got to go back to something what Member Bennett said a couple, meetings ago, is that we really have to make space for all voices to be heard. And some of that looks like this. It's like, if we're going to put a team together, then we got to ask ourselves, okay, are we going to set some seats aside so people whose voices have not traditionally been heard, that there is a place for them at the table? So what does that look like, feel like, and sound like? And if we do not have a full representation of all voices, then we got to go back and start over again. And I will own my own words. As a Black African-American man, one of my first asks is going to be this: when I show up in a space, am I going to be the only one? If I'm going to be the only one, then think about the pressure that is on me to enter to a space that no one looks like me. So that's a conversation that this group, somebody has to be willing to pick up the mantle to say, oh, are all voices represented at the table? Because if they're not, people will watch us as leaders because it may be a very good talk, but we're not walking the walk. And so that's something we have to be very mindful of.
Thank you, Member Brown. Additional discussion on the revised, I suppose it's just a brand new motion now. Member Chirac.
Well, I'll second the motion so we can vote on it later.
Oh, thank you so much if I missed that. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to, oh, I'm sorry, Member Hoy.
I just want to be 100% clear on what the current motion is. Could you just restate it for me, please?
I believe the motion to be an amendment to actually, it's in the HR budget, which puts it in the good governance area, and it's for $150,000 for a position dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But Member Secretary, Mr. Secretary, could you say, is there a purpose beyond diversity, equity, inclusion in hiring, or?
No, I would just say that, and I would say diversity, equity, and inclusion citywide. Okay. And city of Salem government-wide.
Thank you. Member Hoy.
Okay, just to clarify, so we're actually proposing to add an FTE, or are we proposing to fund the city manager's proposed program? Because those are two different things as I understand them.
I would say fund the city manager's program.
It would be for a limited duration position.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a powerful clarification. Limited duration. Okay, with clarifying points on the floor. All those in favor of the motion as described, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes unanimously. I believe I've checked my Sir Robert's rules and we've cleared the floor of all of the motions, and we are back to returning to the safe community area, which has a second for that. And Member William Anderson.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we recommend that the city council provide cameras for our police department, body cams and/or dash cams. And before I get into discussing it, if I could just ask a question of Chief Womack.
I believe that the appropriate way to do it would just seek a second for the floor, and we can have that during discussion.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I think I have Member Hoy as the second for that motion. And Member Anderson, it's your motion. You made it. And if you've got comments or questions, now's the time.
Okay, so I have a quick question for Chief Womack. If I understood you last week, the impression that I got is that you are concerned by the fact that Salem Police Department currently does not have any cameras available for the police department. Is that correct?
As far as body-worn cameras or in-car cameras, I believe we do still have a few cars with a legacy system with some limited capability, but for the most part, the answer is no, there's no camera availability for the officers.
And was it a fair characterization that that concerned you?
Yes. Yes, because it really has become a standard issue piece of equipment for law enforcement. And so to be without it does concern me. From my experience, and even in my past agency, I've experienced with body cameras, and they're just valuable on multiple levels. And when you're working to build increased legitimacy and build trust with your community, it just adds an extra layer of accountability and transparency.
Thank you. So I was surprised that the city doesn't have these adequately supplied to our police department. As I did research over the last week, I found research from the Cato Institute that found that members of the community are significantly made to feel safer in interacting with law enforcement when the camera is there. That's why it's supported, strongly urged by the National Urban League, the ACLU, the NAACP, as well as the NAACP's Legal Defense and Education Fund, the Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights. And so I really strongly hope that the committee will recommend this to the Budget Committee or to the City Council. I believe that ARPA funds can be used to supply the cameras, and that was really the biggest expense. And so I would encourage it to be using ARPA funds for the supplying of the cameras, as well as that first year of operations. And one of the things that struck me is not too long ago, and I mentioned this last week, there was a 16-year-old young woman who was having a dispute with somebody, had a knife, and was about to kill another 16-year-old. And a police officer tragically had to fire and took her life. The immediate reaction on social media was to believe that this is another case of a police officer firing on a member of our BIPOC community. And you guys probably know that, like, LeBron James posted immediately a picture of the police officer and said, "You're next." I could just imagine that happening in Salem, where something happens and the defense the city has is transparency. So when a police officer acts in a way they shouldn't act, the camera helps provide for either training or termination in dependence with what Salem's policy is. When the police officer wasn't acting inappropriately, the camera provides an opportunity for everybody to see this is what actually happened. And it just seems like, given the cost, one way or the other, and given the benefit of our, especially BIPOC community, but all members of our community feeling safer when they interact with the police, that this is just an excellent investment. And since so much of it can be handled as a one-time expense, I think it really is consistent with what the city has been saying that they want out of the ARPA funds.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have maybe a question for the city manager, and also maybe one for the maker of the motion. I fully support funding body cameras for our police department. I think there is no question that it is the right thing to do, and it is well past time to do that. I would dispute that the significant cost are the cameras up front. I think the significant costs are the ongoing expenses. But I would ask the city manager just to clarify, because I'm not sure. I think that the motion was just about providing cameras. And I think that the city manager might be suggesting that there would be some other expenses that would be necessary to implement that program. And I just would ask him to clarify, or either the chief or the city manager to clarify, what do you need to implement an effective body camera program in the police department?
Please, Mr. Powers or
yeah,
Chief Womack.
The short answer, and then Chief Womack from his experience in Stockton, California, and then to call on Krishna again from information technology. You're correct, Member Hoy. And I do not disagree with anything that's been said. It has been for the city. I think for previous budget committees and city councils, again, the more needs than there are resources, and a question of prioritization. And that's certainly the budget committee's role to help, to recommend those priorities to city council. To answer your question directly, the concern, the barrier, the obstacle has been the ongoing costs. And Chief Womack can speak to that from his Stockton experience, and then Krishna or someone else on staff can speak to the work we've done currently and then previously on our estimating what it would take to not the implementation, because that would be part of the one time. It's the ongoing public records requests and the management of the data of the data. So Chief, do you want to speak to your experience in Stockton? Because I think there's some parallels.
Yes, and in the packet that was provided also is general cost estimates from various vendors, and so you're going to have a range there, and we're never going to know the exact cost until we go through a purchasing process and get competitive bidding going on. But you can see there that you're going to have anywhere from ongoing costs. There will be some upfront costs, but the ongoing costs are what gets you, and you can have a range anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 or $500,000. It's a big range there as far as how much work that the vendor will do for you, whether they're going to provide cloud services and manage the data for you, or you're going to have an in-house solution. And so I think working with IT staff and Krishna, there may be some cost-saving mechanisms we can examine as far as reducing costs by managing, housing and managing our own data. But there's still ongoing costs to that, so there will be ongoing costs to deal with. And then there are the impacts of just managing it as far as public records requests, because every time there's a public request for the video, someone actually has to screen it. So watch the video and determine what can be released and what cannot be released. And so it's a time-consuming process. So in Stockton, we did have to dedicate at least one full-time position just to that, supported by other staff as well. But I think that we could be creative about this, but with our eyes wide open that there are ongoing costs to deal with, and possibly even progressively step into it and provide some conservative estimates and go from there. The staff would have to do more work to get a better estimate of costs. But I do want to be clear that there's definitely ongoing costs associated with this that are not small.
Thank you, Chief. So what I'm looking for from staff is some guidance so we can get an effective motion on the floor to implement a program. Because I think that's what the maker of the motion is trying to do, and I fully support him in that. And so I'm trying to help frame that. So what do we need to do tonight to get something on the table for you to implement an effective program? That's what I'd like to know.
Member Nordick, I see your hand, and the maker of the motion, Member Anderson. Member Nordick, would you go first?
Thank you. I fully support the motion and the concept of having body cams and dash cams. Just as a point of clarification, in looking at the total cost per vendor in our materials, unless folks are reading it differently than I am, it includes the cost of storage as I can see it. For example, for vendor Axon, AXON, there's a little footnote next to it that shows the monthly cost per officer, and that footnote says unlimited storage. And it also shows for some of the other agencies it sounds to me like some of them already do accommodate for storage costs, but if folks are reading that differently, I understand. I've heard this before, that with body cams, it's not so much the cost of the camera, it's the cost of the storage. And, again, it seems to me like some of these entities have already tried to bake that into the cost so that we wouldn't have a guessing game. But I would welcome other people's ideas on that, because that's what I'm seeing in front of me.
I'll go with Member Anderson and then offer Chief Womack and Director Namburi a chance to respond to some of the technical questions.
Okay. First of all, I apologize. I certainly did not mean to make it seem like there aren't ongoing costs. When I looked, it looked like some of the upfront costs were around $450,000, which to me, that's a big amount. Of course, when we talk about the city budget, to me, we're talking big amounts. But then the annual, there was one that was like 133 and one that was like 150 or something like that. So I thought that those were much smaller, especially considering if ARPA funds can be used through 2024, it could actually pay for the upfront and those 3 years with less than 10% or roughly 10% of the ARPA funds, maybe a little bit more. And $133,000, I know budgets are tight, but given the benefits, it's really a very, very small percentage of the current budget. I mean, it's not a lot of money. And I think given the benefits, it's just well worth it.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Director Namburi, did you want to respond, or Chief Womack?
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to make sure as far as the storage costs are, you can do offsite or on-site storage, but if it is an off-site storage, even though they say it is an unlimited storage, some vendors actually charge extra for retrieval. If you want to retrieve the information, that comes with additional costs because we actually deal with that on all of our systems. That is where actually they make money. So I just want to make sure that even though it says storage is free, it's not actually free. The other piece of it is the retention policy, and I think how much we want to spend depends on the retention policy of these videos and the systems that we need to have to be able to manage these videos. So there is a lot of costs that are associated with it, but I just want to make sure that I comment on the storage piece. But.
Thank you, Chief Womack.
Yeah, the other thing I would say was that you'll see that some of these costs, some is a high upfront cost and a lower cost ongoing, or vice versa. And a lot of that has to do with, for example, with Axon Taser, it's a higher ongoing cost, but you're also getting updated cameras and equipment along the way. So as a camera becomes outdated, they just give you a new one. These other systems, you're buying a set of cameras up front. 2-3 years down the road, you need new cameras. You're buying a whole new set of cameras. So there's ongoing costs there too that aren't showing up in that ongoing maintenance cost, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Chief. I think the question from the committee is, what do we clearly, if the city council tasks you with coming up with the best system for the city, you'll bring that back to the city council. I think for us to move forward tonight as a budget committee, we need to know how to draw the line and what to put at the end of it. And I think that's going to be a recommendation either best from yourself, Chief Womack, or from City Manager Powers, or maybe Mr. Eggleston. What does the number and the description of it need to be that it's going to hand it off to the city council in a way that can be successful if it passes?
Just to take one take on it, you can make a recommendation to city council to include it in the budget and not specify an amount at this time, but include it in your recommendation. And then we would have over a month to figure out that other part.
Okay. City Manager, I guess I'll take a question from a member, a comment from a member Lewis.
Yeah, I want to see how close I am. It's sounding like to supply the cameras would be about $450,000, and then an ongoing expense of around $200,000 a year. Is that within the ballpark?
I would say yes, but again, 3 or 4 years down the road, when we needed new cameras, it would be another $450,000. So it just depends on which vendor you're going to go with as far as the way the costs play out.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Lewis.
And if I may, Chairperson Taggett, I'm sorry.
Please.
That's the kind of analysis I think that you just mentioned that we would be able to do for council prior to council's consideration of the budget. We wouldn't have the exact information that we would receive through a bidding process or request for proposals, but we could do some additional analysis weighing the costs and benefits that Chief Womack is referring to within the the structure of the city of Salem as opposed to his experience in Stockton.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I can, Member Nordic, I see your hand. If you'd like to go ahead, please.
Sure, just briefly. One of the things that I would encourage our city staff to look at is other potential pots of money. It very well could be that this is an ARPA eligible expense, but as I understand it, there may be other forms of federal funding coming. And if Budget Committee, like other things that they're recommending tonight, if Budget Committee thinks this is a priority for us, then there are ways for council to direct staff to investigate grant opportunities. And there are plenty of ways to do that, to grow the pie. And we've already talked about some of the mechanisms for doing that tonight. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this and understanding that sometimes you just don't have the costs nailed down to the last penny, but it's worth moving forward to the next phase.
Thank you, Member Nordyke. I'll return to the motion maker, Member Anderson. I think the choice before you is to call the question, or if you'd like to entertain a friendly amendment to your motion to bring it into line with Mr. Eggleston's recommendation?
Yeah, my most important thing is to be sure that this is in the budget and the city council knows that this is something that is highly recommended. I would certainly entertain a friendly motion.
Is there someone from the floor that could restate Mr. Eggleston's recommendation? Josh, you almost look ready.
I was just going to say that Member Anderson can change his motion to withdraw it and do a new one. So.
Thank you. Member Hoy.
I'll give it a shot if Member Anderson would prefer that, or I'm happy to be quiet too.
I would say proceed.
All right. So I would move that the budget committee include a body-worn camera program in the city budget with the amount to be determined by city council at a later date.
I second.
Thank you. We'll consider Member Anderson's previous motion withdrawn, and we'll move forward with Member Hoy's motion. Is that a legitimate, Member Bennett? You seem like you have
I just
a question.
wondered, I thought I recalled Member Anderson mentioning car cams as well. And did you want to add that to have those analyzed? You could get it all done at once.
I'm sorry, but I intended that as an entire system. It kind of
great.
together.
Okay, thanks.
So I withdraw my motion and second Member Hoy's motion.
Thank you. Thank you for stating that affirmatively on the record. A point of clarification I have is whether the budget officer suggested that information, even a dollar amount, might be available to the city council before the adoption of the budget, which would put it on a pretty fast track. And so that would be more defined by the time the budget was actually voted on and approved by the city council. Is that your intent with the motion?
My intent was that we would leave the amount blank and city council would fill it in. And by city council, I mean Josh, and we would approve it when he brings it to us for approval. So okay. Yeah, as soon as he has it. And I was anticipating that would be at our June meeting when we typically approve the budget. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion on the motion on the floor?
Just real quick to clarify, if you don't mind, it's Please. Not included in the budget, but it's a recommendation for council to include it in the budget.
Okay. Understood. Okay, seeing, Member Anderson.
Okay, that's different than what I understood. My understanding of Member Hoy's motion was that it is added to the budget with the amount to be determined by city council, but that it would be in the budget with the passage of this motion.
Probably a better way to say it, if I could respond to that, Mr. Chair, probably a better way to say it would be the recommended budget, because that's what we're really doing tonight, is approving a recommended budget, which if this passes will include a body-worn camera program with the amount to be inserted by staff before final approval. So I think we're there. I think we're where you want to be.
Member Anderson, are you good with your second? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, all those in favor of, thank you for the discussion, all those in favor of the motion to include a body and car camera system into the recommended budget for an amount to be determined at a later time, the June meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Okay, seeing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Okay, we return to the motion on the floor to approve the fiscal year 2022 Safe Community Result Area budget now as amended. Is there any additional discussion? I see Member Hoy.
Nope, I was just going to make the motion.
The motion has been made. We can call the question if we are done with discussion on the motion.
I think you do need a second. I don't think there was a motion prior to.
Second.
Really?
Second.
Okay, thank you. I've got a motion. I stand corrected. Member Hoy and seconded by Member Chirac. Any additional discussion on this result area? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? This motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, let's keep scrolling. And our next area to approve this evening is the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure and capital improvements. Mr. Budget Officer Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total for the results area is just over 137 million, and then the total for the construction funds is just over 200 million. It includes transportation, street lights, the geo debt service, utility administration, plan development, engineering, and project management utility operations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the staff or any other discussion related to the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area? Member Anderson, thank you.
So the streetlight services, I assume that would include the cameras and the speed on green. Is that correct?
That is incorrect. It's actually in the Safe Community Results area in the Traffic Safety Fund.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to bop over to the other side of my, I don't see any other. Member Lewis, thank you. If I stammered long enough.
Yeah, and I'm just curious. We've talked about our results areas for years now, and there's 1, 2, 6 of them, and now, and maybe I've missed this before, but now all of a sudden I'm seeing in those result areas the addition of the capital improvement projects. Am I missing something, or are we adding that for a specific reason?
No, you're not. Oh, sorry, if I may, Chairperson.
Please, of course.
No, you're not missing anything, Member Lewis. We're really trying to, through a variety of methods, really show for the Budget Committee, for Council, for the community, how the city is spending its resources, and to really try to capture all of the city's resources and not just have it be a listing of special projects or new initiatives, but to really try to capture what we're already doing, which is considerable, and to show what we're doing in a way that is reflective of the result areas. And, you know, obviously for infrastructure, a significant majority is our actual projects. We're trying to just do a better job of showing through in a visual way, you know, what we're already doing.
Okay.
Okay, then I will. Oh, Member Bennett.
No, I was going to do your motion.
You're looking for. I'm looking for a motion. You've got a motion.
Okay, I'll move staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, Member McCoy, for the second on our safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area. Is there any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of passing the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, hearing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. We will move on to our fifth area tonight, which is strong and diverse economy. Mr. Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Strong diverse economy is almost $13 million as parking, leasehold, equipment replacement, general fund, cultural tourism, airport fund, building safety, and downtown parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff or other discussion related to our strong and diverse economy result area this evening? Member Bennett.
Just a very brief comment on it. This is going to be a really important budget for us over the next year. As we move out of COVID, we are seeing a lot of interest in our downtown and other parts of the community for development and economic expansion. This really will play a great role, I think, in kind of that broader recovery besides the the health and that this is going to be the economic health of the community. I hope folks had a good look at it. I think it tells a lot about where we're headed. So thanks.
Thank you. Member Hoy.
Sorry, I see Member Anderson's hand.
Oh yeah, Member Anderson, do you have a comment before we entertain a motion from the floor?
I'm sorry, this was actually a question.
Oh yeah, please, just go ahead.
The new amphitheater that's being put in the Riverfront Park, is that going to be charging admission to get offsets to the cost, or is that going to be like the current one where it's just a community service?
I see Public Works Director Peter Fernandez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yes, if I may, Chair Tigan. Member Anderson, we are currently seeking some advice from professional venue operators to see if there is a way to run that professionally for events, but it will also be available to the community on a first come, first served basis for you got a garage band and you want to use a stage, or you want to have a wedding, or you want to have a family reunion. So it'll be available for all those things as well as for professional events.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. If there's no other questions or comments on this budget area, then I'll entertain a motion from the floor. Member Hoy.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Member Hoy and a second from Member McCoy. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing no discussion on our strong and diverse economy result area budget motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Okay, hearing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. And thank you. Our sixth and final area this year will be our welcome and livable community result area budget. Mr. Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total for this result area is $36.3 million. That includes the errata sheet that you approved earlier this evening. And the services included here are planning, code enforcement, the library, the HRAP program, programs and other grants for houseless residents, social services, parks and recreation, Center 50 Plus, CDBG and home, public art, TOC grants, and then also the trust funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff or any other discussion related to the welcome and livable community result area? I see Member Stapleton, then Member Nordyke.
Thank you. Yes, I have no motion tonight, but I just wanted to say that I am thanking the city staff for their recommendation on the library hours. I think that is a wise way of moving forward, waiting for the steering committee to meet, for that plan, the 5-year plan to be set. I did see the letter from the library staff saying that they weren't ready to move on any of these kind of improvements to services at this time with the move and with that planning yet to happen. So I just wanted to voice that here. Thank you for that. I recognize that I am still very committed to, as many other people I think are, improving the services and branch libraries and all of the things that in a beautiful world would be fully funded. So I am committed to that. And also I just wanted to say, I didn't see this in anything, but I am also really committed to seeing more done for our tree canopy. And I think the best route for me to do something about that would be in the climate action plan. And so those are 2 points that I wanted to make before moving forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stapleton. Member Nordyke.
Thank you. It's hard for me to tell exactly how much of that money is being spent to address homelessness. And I know that that's a very loaded term because addressing homelessness can involve a variety of things, everything from the money that we spend from Salem Housing Authority on vouchers, on homeless rental assistance program and such. But Josh, if you were to estimate roughly how much money is in this budget to address homelessness, Not holding you to a precise amount, but what is that rough amount?
Give me about 3 minutes and I'll give you an answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Member Nordyke, can I clarify your question? Are you asking about in our welcome and livable community result area, or are you asking about the city of Salem's budget? I guess I'm not clear what the question is.
Well, the city of Salem budget, but it seems like a lot of those things are certainly funneled into this particular area. But no, I'm sure there could be other sources within the budget, but there are a number that have been particularly called out as we've discussed this budget.
Thank you, Member
This
Nordyke.
particular piece of budget, I mean. Thank you.
Member Lewis, if you have a comment while Josh gets his number. Oh, you just turned yourself on mute.
Don't applaud. I'd like to make sure, Josh, that the figure you come up with includes staff time, including their salaries, benefits. I too would like to know a total amount that the city is investing in this one issue.
Thank you, Member Lewis. I'll reiterate on Josh's behalf the advice to ask questions of staff before the last night of the Budget Committee meeting. That goes to all of our members, not just you two, but so they can give us good, thorough responses before we vote on the budget. Member Stapleton.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could just take a 5-minute break.
You know, if Josh is looking for a number, let's take a break and at the behest of the members and come back at 8:41. Thank you.
Kristen, can you help Josh out as well when we get back in?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
Good.
Okay, welcome back to the City of Salem Budget Committee meeting. Hope everyone able to use the break well. When we last left our committee and staff, we had a question on the floor to the budget officer of the city regarding the total cost of homelessness on the city budget. And Josh, if you're ready to proceed.
I don't know if ready is the right word, but I have a number for you. It's just over $14 million, and that's not inclusive of staff time across departments. It's not inclusive of how much time facilities spends cleaning up things. What it does include is some mitigation in the parks restoration, the homeless and sheltering coordination, the affordable housing programs, the social service programs. As we talked earlier tonight, it includes the CDBG and home programs. Those are the largest pieces. The 8-trap program, including the carryover, and then also the homeless programs and grants, that's about $800,000. And Kristen can provide more information about what might or might not be included in those numbers.
Thank you. And Director Rutherford?
Yes, good evening. So within our CDBG and home programs, those are all guided by our 5-year consolidated plan. So any funds that we are administrating through those programs has to be in alignment with our consolidated plan, which prioritizes addressing homelessness and then providing affordable housing as the top 2 goals within that plan. So almost all resources that you will see under those programs are going to be targeted directly to either homelessness or affordable housing, with the exception of funds that we've received to address COVID. And a lot of those have actually been targeted to mortgage assistance, rental assistance, and the prevention of homelessness as for people that were impacted by the crisis. We also have the general fund allocation for social services that we receive from City Council, and that is largely associated with homelessness in one way or another. For example, supporting the food bank and providing assistance to vulnerable populations, or for example, the call center for Northwest Human Services and mental health programs, those sorts of things. So between those and the HRAP program, and this also, doesn't address urban renewal and the funds that urban renewal is contributing to affordable housing projects as well to provide lower income housing to help provide housing for those impacted by homelessness. So the number that Josh provided excluded that number.
Member Nordyke?
Thank you. That's very helpful. Does this include, you mentioned CDBG, and for the uninitiated, those are community development block grants. So and I want to make sure that for the 10 or 12 people who are watching at home, that includes a lot of federal money. So right. So it's not all general fund dollars. To the contrary, that includes a lot of federal grants that are provided to us that we apply for. And does that 14 million include a lot of the housing provided through Salem Housing Authority, which, as I understand it, that serves thousands of people in the area?
No, other than the HRAP program, the Housing Authority budget is separate from the city budget, so it's not included in those numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good point of clarification. Thanks. Any other additional questions or discussion related to the Welcome Livable Community Result area? If there's none, I'll entertain a motion from the floor to a motion to approve that result area.
I move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Member Hoy, and a second from Member Anderson. Any further discussion on the motion to approve the staff recommendation on the City of Salem's FY22 Welcome and Livable Community Result area? Okay, seeing no additional discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you. Any opposition? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We have reached the end of our 6 budget result areas. This is where we would usually set aside time for public comment to address items not on the agenda. We have no one signed up for public comment this evening, so waited suspense. And we will head to point number 9 on our agenda before we adjourn this evening. Let's just say that the next meetings related to the fiscal year 2022 budget will occur as follows. On Monday, June 14th, 2021, the FY22 budget and state revenue sharing public hearing will be held, and 2 weeks later, Monday, June 28th, 2021, the fiscal year 2022 budget and CIP adoption will come before the City Council. I will take a moment of personal privilege as the chair to first thank all of the city staff for your work preparing the budget over the last number of months, answering folks' questions. This is an intense month of work for you. Thank you very much on behalf of the committee. I'd like to thank citizen committee members for your work, and to those who support you, allowing you to do this work on a Wednesday evening. I'm looking at my family who lets me do it, and certainly to the counselors and the mayor for your continued service. Secretary Anderson.
Yeah, Chair Tigan, on behalf of the counselors and the other committee and the staff, I'd like to thank you very much for your excellent shepherding of this committee. You ran terrific meetings, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I know we all do.
That means a lot. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, if there is any other business before the Budget Committee this evening? All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.